decided that we were going to take a walk with God. We did. We chose just now to walk with God. And it may have just, for some people who get into your headspace, it may have just been an intellectual move. And some people who are focused on their body, it might have just been a physical move. But for those of us who know and recognize ourselves as spiritual beings that are the image and likeness of the living presence, not a presence that we place in a human image, but a presence that is beyond anything that we know in this physical human reality, something that is all of it. We are walking and living and moving and having our beingness with this presence. You see, sometimes there's this figuring out and this calculation that we're trying to do as we walk this human journey. And we're trying to figure out, like for some people, they're trying to figure out, well, what is God? Or how do we know that God exists? Some people are trying to figure out why God is letting murders happen and shootings happen. Some people are trying to figure out why God allowed capitalism to take over the economic systems. Some people are allowing how long something like slavery could happen, or how something like apartheid could go on for so long. So many people are wondering how you could have something that would create something else that would then create chemical weapons. And somebody else is trying to figure out why something would create something else that would then experiment on human beings without their permission. Like, there are so many questions to see, but if you really look at what's happening, you can't deny this living presence. Behind all that we see, there is an intelligence. There is such precision in the universe. Like if you watch any of those National Geographic specials, and apparently Will Smith is our new Lauren Green, because he's now doing the voiceovers and inviting us all to watch the next iteration of the Nat Geo, because it's, everything's abbreviated in the 2000s. It's Nat Geo. It's not National Geographic. But what's interesting is even something as natural as National Geographic is recognizing and reconciling with their own racism. That's right. Like recently, National Geographic realized, maybe they hired some people of color, that their coverage of people of color for much of their time was in a very narrow scope, which then when you look at it is racist. But instead of condemning itself and just trying to destroy it, you can recognize a limited idea and perception and then open it up. Yes. Open it up. Help other people see that we were scientists or we were discoverers and we had such a narrow point of view. And we can do better, and we will do better, and we will shine a greater light on even our misdeeds and our missteps. Not so that we can beat ourselves up, because there's no need in doing that. We didn't necessarily take the pictures or write that from that perspective, but we know today so we can do better. So as we even look at something like the patterns that we see in the universe, again, this precision, that there is this living presence that doesn't look like a human, doesn't need to sit on a throne, isn't beyond the clouds, because we've got telescopes showing us beyond the clouds, so it clearly isn't there, because no one's home. But there's something more going on. When we look at how things unfold, we recognize throughout history the patterns. And so some things can happen on accident, right? If you spill milk, we can't suddenly decide that there is an equation that milk will spill on a regular basis at this particular time, on this occasion, every third moon of the 8th Wednesday of the autumn, spring, summer, Saturday. That's not exactly how it works. But there are things that happen in a moment, but there are things that consistently happen. And so what we know as human beings, that nothing of consistency, of precision, happens by happenstance. That there is something behind it all. That there is something behind it that is also neutral. But the part that isn't neutral is humanity. Because humanity, as we have been created, we have wants and we have desires. We have fears. We want things a particular way, or we don't want things a particular way. From whatever has been our experience, that's how we move through the world. And so as we look at this world and as we start to take it on, it can look awfully messy. Especially if the primary lens that we see the world is through the news media. if we use the news media as our primary basis of seeing the world, of getting to know each other, we have a very limited scope, again, of what humanity looks like. Now, I'm not here to talk about the gun debate, but let's talk about the gun debate for a second, right? Just from the idea of it isn't the mechanism, and it isn't necessarily simply this one thing or this thing over here. Nobody really talks about the fact that we have a culture within our society from which this fruit springs. Yes. Yes. These things don't happen because there are these weapons in existence. These things don't simply happen because schools don't have guns all over them. It's not in a vacuum like that. We must recognize that it's a part of our culture and a part of our society. You do that and you don't judge anyone or anything. Notice everyone is able to have that conversation. Everybody's able to have that discussion. So as we look at God, as we look at spirit, as we look at abundance, as we look at plenitude, as we look at harmony and balance, all of these ideas and concepts that we see in the universe and we see in the world, we can take it all in without pushing anyone out. Now, some of you know that just this past Wednesday I had the honor of speaking at Agape International Spiritual Center for the very first time. And it was a big deal. I've been a member of Agape for 5 years. I'm a student in the Michael Bernard Beckwith School of Ministry. I'm a practitioner at Agape for 5 years now, and I'm a staff member at Agape for 1.5 years. So you might think I had a little bit invested in what it would be like. You know, if my teacher asked me to speak, there is a particular way that I'm holding that and carrying that. And so part of what I spoke about on Wednesday is still with me, so it's still with us. So we're going to revisit it a little bit, those of you that talked about it. And to revisit it lightly, there is a lot going on in the world, and it seems like, the perception that I have had in my life and that clients and people share with me often is that there are things that are going on in this world that we have absolutely no control over. And there is some truth to that, except for when we say there are things going on in this world that we don't have any control over, the one thing that we do have control over, we keep seceding control over, which is ourselves. Not just ourselves as in the body and the motion where you just took a walk with God, but also how you see the world. Your perception of the situations, the circumstances, your situation, your circumstances, you have control over that. And so on Wednesday, we talked a little bit about 3 things. We talked about the idea that comparison can steal away from us our own identity. We're so busy comparing ourselves to other people, other circumstances, other situations. Even if we talk about America and we talk about there's more gun violence here than it is in other countries, that still puts our attention on the other country, and it is not addressing the very unique journey that America has had that no other country in the world has had. And so we instead of focusing on that, we said, instead of being focused on comparison, what we need is self-awareness. So we need to take on a greater awareness of self. Knowledge of self, know thyself, is one of the edicts on so many temples around the world. Yes, in Kemet or Egypt, but yes, also in other nations and countries and journeys. The reality is that we get the highest and most information and knowledge through our awareness of ourselves. Not just in a self-aggrandizing way where we know what we like, we know what we don't like, we know what color looks good on us, we know what doesn't look good on us, we know that we like bow ties more than we like long ties. It is not that kind of thing, right? And I was telling somebody today, I was like, I don't even know if I really like bow ties, but most of you know that I wear them because of my father. And my father, when he made his transition 4 years ago, left me a closet full of bow ties. Not really like written, but like, we're not throwing these away. So when you see that, I embrace the idea as a person who has wrestled with his relationship with his father for most of his life and enjoys a good relationship with him now because I'm knowing him better, and so I embrace it. So as we look at all of these things that are going on, I never really worked on comparing myself to my father. But as I got to know myself better, my relationship with my dad, even when he was here, improved. It transformed. One of the other things that we talked about on Wednesday was excuses. So often we get caught up in making excuses. And the reality is, and we're flying through this, because I'm going to get to what I'm talking about today. Even though I'm technically talking about this today, aren't I? I mean, it's not yesterday yet, and it's not tomorrow yet. So let me get back into this part of the time-space continuum. Now, when we talk about excuses, the thing that what I realized and what came forward the most powerfully is when a person who has excuses is struggling with their purpose. When you have a purpose, you can shovel anything. Anything, yeah, that too. I didn't say it, but you thought it. You can shovel anything. You can put your hand anywhere if you have a purpose. If I've got to feed my family, if I've got to take care of myself. People go into burning buildings to save people because they have a purpose. Not because they like the salary or because chicks dig guys in uniforms or guys dig chicks in uniforms for the women firefighters out there. Look, the reality is there is behind our excuses a lack of purpose. But if one sets their intention to realize their purpose, it can come. Finding our purpose is such a complex equation, right? We feel like we come at it from all these different angles, but the reality is when we establish an intention, it becomes much clearer. Talk for another day. The other thing that we talked about on Wednesday was limitations. And I doubled it up, even though I didn't say it on Wednesday. It becomes like a C comparison, E excuses, and we double up on limitations. So it becomes like a cell. Because it feels like we put ourselves in prison when we settle for comparing ourselves to other people, what they look like, what they should look like, what bodies should look like, what hair should look like, what clothes should look like, what economic situation should look like, whether or not I can. Because then you can't even be honest. If you're so busy in comparison, you cannot even be honest and authentic about your journey, about your experiences, even with yourself. So then we're in excuses. We can't even really be with who we are right now because we're so busy making excuses, we're not in our purpose. And when we settle for limitations, so often that the limitations that we settle for are when other people inspire us. Watch this. One of the things that I became acutely aware of is the limitations that we put on ourselves when somebody's done something that we could never imagine doing. I'm going to kind of tell on somebody today, without naming anybody. Today is the LA Marathon. And my intention a couple of months ago was to run the LA Marathon. I have made some changes in plans and some other things that I'm doing, so I'm not running. But when I share that, or whenever I talk about it, so many people say something like, what? I could never do that. I could never imagine doing that. So you put yourself right inside a prison cell. Now, it's not about judgment. It's just no limits. No limits. I don't want to do it. I'm not interested. Hey, all of that is acceptable. Because that doesn't take any of the possibility of the power and the potency of the living God that is moving as you away from you. Yeah. Yes. Because that's what you do. It's like you put yourself in a prison in your own home and you're starving because you can't get to the fridge. You're in a house with food in a cell and it's like whatever is in your fridge. Or maybe what's in your friend's house because your fridge looks like mine. And whenever people come over, it's like, I'm not asking for anything to eat right now. Let's go out to eat because your fridge is empty. I'm just not home that much. And so when I talked about it on Wednesday, the topic was thieves in the temple, don't miss the gifts. And so this same idea of thieves was with me even as I thought about being with you today. And so today's topic, now that I'm going to get to it, is a den of thieves, a seat at the divine table. So often, I remember hearing that phrase coming up when we talk about movies like, oh, it's a den of thieves. It's probably in some great rich books. And you get a really clear picture, right? Like, for me, in my mind, I imagine those scenes in movies where people are running from someone and they burst in the door and they find themselves in a worse situation than what they were in, who they were running from, right? So you're running through, you think you get away from the cops, but then you end up in your arch enemy's business meeting, right? and you're surrounded. And a lot of times that's what this world feels like. Especially when we're getting our information from sources that are more interested in telling us what's wrong than what is good. You see, you may find yourself in a den of thieves on a consistent basis. That den may be consistently telling you that you're not enough. That den can be consistently telling you that you are too fat, too skinny, too gay, too straight. It can tell you that you spend too much time by yourself. You spend too much time out in the street, too much time. Like there's just this constant thing that says whatever it is you're doing is not right. And you know that you're in a place like that when it's so focused on duality, that there is a binary constant of right and wrong. Exactly. And the right and wrongness completely misses the point. You see, we've all been invited into this. We didn't happen to be born. I know I don't need to go into it, but then there was your mom and your dad and yada, yada, yada. Bam! You appear. But the reality is, into a den of thieves. That's hilarious. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. Way to drop me off. But the reality is, I see you down there. The reality is, the world that we are in and of itself, is limited. Not us, but the material world, right? And until we transmute the material world, it is what it is. Trees were trees were trees were trees were trees were trees until someone decided that they could become lumber. Trees were trees were trees were trees were trees until someone decided that they could be used for fire. And they realized that. And we're really talking about the extreme to which that went, but it was a necessary realization of what the gifts this planet is giving us can allow us to do. Water was water was water was water was water till it was really hot, and somebody figured out how to change the water into ice. And so there's this idea of how we see this world. You were invited into existence for a reason. There's a saying as a part of some organizations that says, many are called, but few are chosen. I think the Marines kind of use an adaptation of that, right? It goes back way before A Course in Miracles. It's an old, ancient saying. And the thing about it is, everyone is called.
Thank you.
You don't get here without a call. You can't come without a call. But you and I have to be told that we have a call. Because everything in this world tells us we don't. Because we're in a world that's trying to steal away our destiny. We're in a world that's trying to get us to be so caught up in the corporate or the business or the anti-war or the anti-violence, whatever it is, even things that have an uplifting tone, that we don't know our purpose. But when we are in our purpose, when we recognize that we have a calling, we can do everything we are meant to do on this planet. You can write plays, you can dance, you can do music. You don't necessarily have to be focused on doing it for profit. But imagine a world where people shared their gifts and it had absolutely nothing to do with money. I used to say all the time, I love sports. I love baseball, I love basketball. In the last 12 years, I've fallen in love with what the rest of the world calls football. And it's amazing. World Cups this year. I would say come over to my house, but there's no food. It's not a good balance. But look, the rest of the world that we live in is continually telling us that we don't have enough, that we are not enough, but the reality is you have been invited. The question is whether or not you will take a seat at the divine table. The divine table has everything. Think about the greatest spread you've ever seen, and you've never seen this spread. Because on this spread is I can't fail. On this spread, more than enough. On this spread, all gifts are fully realized. At this table, when you come to the table of the divine, you realize there's nothing wrong with me. That perfection is my existence. Not, I don't trip and stumble. That's not what perfection is. Perfection is, I am and I trip and stumble. And I get up and I trip and stumble. It's all a part of it. You see, if you think that perfection means without flaws, you're looking at something like, can you imagine somebody that works at a diamond place looking at God and talking about the flaws in his diamonds? Can you imagine? Think about that. That's what they do. They basically say, excuse me, God, ma'am, your rubies are flawed. That's what they say. Because somebody said that God's creation is supposed to be a particular way. I mean, would you let somebody come into your house, the food that you just cooked, and say, you know, your mac and cheese is missing a little something? Can you imagine somebody walking up to Van Gogh or Michelangelo? You need a little more red. If it had a little more red, you'd be in there and they remember you for the rest of eternity. But you don't have that red, so, you know, best of luck. You, my friends, brothers and sisters, are invited to take a seat at the table. Are you interested?
Yes.
I want you to think about that thing that is seeking to emerge through you. It doesn't have to be a new business or an organization. It doesn't have to be a new relationship. It doesn't have to be a purchase of any kind. It doesn't have to do with your waistline. It doesn't necessarily have to do with your height or your hair color. It doesn't necessarily have to do with anything material. But it could. It could be your calling to serve the foster youth that are aging out of the system. You could decide to be a part of a community. I know one in Orange County that decides that they want to serve the foster youth in this world because we have a system that decided to do away with all of the homes for children when they used to put them in the orphanages because that system was corrupt. And they decided to build a foster care system, but it has its limitations. So maybe you want to join a community that cares about those people. I know one. Or maybe you want to join a community that has recognized the value of the elders and their wisdom and doesn't want to just tell older people, citizens, community members that they should just go over into the corner and get in a bed and sit there and watch Jeopardy all day. Alex Trebek is not nearly that entertaining. The reality is, at the divine table that you are invited to is the opportunity to serve, to give, to realize your full potential, not based on limited ideas of yourself, not based on any limitation whatsoever. Like, free yourself of every limitation. For a moment, just in this moment, close your eyes with me. And as you close your eyes, I want you to see yourself. Not your body self. That's your body. You can see your body anytime. I want you to see the self that has no shape or form. I want you to see the self that has no limitations, no boundaries. I want you to allow yourself to rise up within you right now. Allow it to rise up and take on all that is available for it at the divine table. In order for it to fulfill its destiny, its calling, it first must realize that it is. So in this moment, we know that it is. It is more than our emotions. It is more than our thoughts. It is more than this body. Oh, we think of all those people who have done superhuman things. And so we allow ourselves to be superhuman. We allow ourselves the compassion that doesn't hold anything against anyone ever. We We allow ourselves to love in such a way that no one is ever left out. That the prisoners in the darkest caverns of the prisons in this country or any other country, they are loved by us. That the creativity and the harmony and the balance and the stretching out of our awareness is such that we see ourselves in others. We have superhuman vision. It is beyond the limited aspects of simply our physical eye. And we are able to see beyond the limits of time and space. We walk in eternity. We take our seat at the divine table and we sup with love. We sup with compassion. We sup with creativity. We sup with creative imagination. We sup in such a way that we are the embodiment of these qualities. Joy lives as us. Harmony, peace, grace lives as us. Peace, wisdom lives as us. And so because of this, there is more of this in the world. The bridges are being built over the walls. The walls of our consciousness. The walls that they, whoever they are, have told us separate us from them. Oh, we luxuriate in this field of life itself. And today, in a greater way than ever before, we know it is so as our livingness. If you are in agreement with this, if you're willing to be this, simply say yes.
Yes.
If you're willing to take a seat at the divine table, simply say yes.
Yes.
If you are willing to allow life to live, to expand, to heal, to transform, to liberate in a greater way than it ever has done before as your life, say yes.
Yes.
So I honor your sacred yes, and I celebrate it. And we all come together in celebration of this reality as we have taken the authority of our own life. We sit at this table, we know that we cannot fail, and that all that we do serves the highest and best expression of this journey which we call life. We simply allow it to be. And so it is. Amen?
Amen.
Amen?
Amen.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Let me hear you celebrate it. Good. I mean, I just, the ushers are coming forward because it's that time, and I'm inviting you into this table in another way. You see, as we come together here in the Soul Center community, we want to recognize that if this community does anything for us,